The Waldorf Astoria's top-floor conference suite was designed to close impossible deals. Warm brass, hushed carpet, and a skyline so close it felt like you could reach out and drag Manhattan into your lap. On the table, a leather folio, a Montblanc pen, and a prenuptial agreement thick enough to bruise. Clara Winters stood by the window, palms flat against a cool glass, watching rush-hour taxis string down Park Avenue in precise yellow ribbons. The afternoon light had gone metallic, the kind New York wore just before a storm. Her reflection looked like a stranger hair twisted into a sleek chignon, winter pale face, blue eyes that refused to blink first. Behind her, her father cleared his throat. Clara, Richard Winters sounded exhausted, the way men sound after years of insisting it would all work out. His suit fit, but the man inside it had shrunk. We can't survive another margin call. This marriage buys time. Clara didn't turn. You mean it buys us silence, she said evenly. It buys the banks a reason not to pull every line we have. It buys you one more quarter before the floor caves in. You think I don't know the cost? His voice cracked. Winters Shipping has 5 generations behind it. I won't be the one to bury it. The door opened with a muted click. Daniel Thorne entered like a verdict. 6'2", shoulders that made suits look engineered, charcoal tie knotted to a faultless line. He wasn't handsome the way actors are. He was handsome the way knives are. Storm grey eyes took in the room, then fixed on Clara, calculations sliding over her like a scan. Apologies for the delay, he said, not sounding sorry. His voice had that expensive rasp cultivated in boardrooms and depositions. He set his briefcase down, removed his gloves, and took the head of the table without asking. Clara stayed by the window. We didn't start without you. Of course you didn't. He slid a document across the table with 2 manicured fingers. This is the counter schedule. Ceremony within 7 days. License filed within 48 hours. Your father's bridge financing clears escrow the morning of. Richard reached for the papers like a drowning man lunging for a rope. Clara finally moved. She crossed the room and set her hand firmly on the folio. Stopping him, before we exchange rings like collateral, she said, I want to hear you say it. Why me? Daniel's mouth edged into something almost like a smile. Because optics matter. My board needs to see stability after the Harbor Point acquisition. Your lenders need to see a savior after a disastrously public earnings call. And New York loves a redemption arc. He leaned back. We give them one. That's the public answer, Clara said. I want your private one. A beat. Then he let the smile die. Winters Shipping cut corners, he said, voice turning quiet and surgical. A crane came down at Pier 47 15 years ago. The DA passed. OSHA settled. Do you remember the headlines? Ms. Winters. I remember the funeral. Richard flinched. Clara's fingers tightened around the folio until the leather creaked. My family lost someone that day. Daniel continued, tone smooth but lethal. No indictments. No apology. Just a bump in your share price. He folded his hands. I don't need your love. Ms. Winters, I need your father to wake up every morning and see you wearing my name. Clara forced herself to breathe. So this is about revenge, dressed like rescue. This is about leverage, dressed like lace. Richard found his voice, thin and shaken. Daniel, if you want blood, I want performance, Daniel said, cutting him off. And compliance. His gaze returned to Clara. The prenup protects my estate. The NDA protects my board. The Combs plan protects your family from looking like beggars. It's elegant, really. Elegant, Clara repeated. Because if she didn't mock the word, she might throw the folio at his perfect face. You're proposing a wedding like a hostile takeover. I prefer the term strategic merger, and if I say no, he didn't blink. You won't. Silence pressed against the windows. Down on Park, a siren wailed and faded. Clara looked at her father, at the stubborn pride in his jaw, at the fear pooling behind it. She hated what this city did to men like him. She hated bankers with smiles and claws. And she hated that the man across from her, the one who wanted to turn her life into a daily punishment, was right about one thing. Winters couldn't survive another week of bleeding. She slid the folio to herself and flipped through. Clean structure. Bulletproof counsel. An entire life mapped in clauses and carved dash-outs. Her eyes caught on a page. Public appearances. I'm not a mannequin, she said. I won't be marched out like a handbag. You won't, Daniel said. You'll be a narrative. Charming, she kept reading. Residency requirement. Torn Tower, Tribeca. Security protocol, private detail, non-negotiable. Charitable visibility joint initiatives to soften his image and launder hers. It was all there. Even the ring had a line item. Vintage Cartier family collection. He'd already picked her prison and the jewelry to match. Clara closed the folio. When she spoke, her voice was cool, the way the air feels right before snow. I'll do it. Richard sagged with relief, a sound escaping him that hurt her to hear. Daniel's gaze didn't change, but satisfaction pulsed like a second heartbeat in the room. One more thing, Clara said. Of course, Daniel replied, as if she were negotiating dessert. You don't get my heart, she said. Not in a week. Not in a year. Not ever. You can buy my signature, my headline, my time, but not that. Daniel considered her for a long, clinical moment. He stepped around the table until he was close enough that she could see the pale scar at his jawline. She hadn't noticed before. The city threw fractured light across his eyes. Ms. Winters, he said softly, your heart isn't an asset I'm acquiring. No, she said, chin high. It's the one thing I'm keeping. For a second, the briefest, most disorienting second, something like respect flickered there. Then it was gone, shuttered behind steel. Sin, he said. Clara took the Mont Blanc. Her hand didn't shake. She wrote her name in a steady, elegant line beneath the words that would become her cage. When she finished, she set the pen down with care, as if gentleness could make any of this less brutal. Daniel slid the agreement back into the folio, snapped it shut, and rose. My office will coordinate the license with the city clerk, he said. You'll receive a schedule for fittings and media. The ceremony will be private. He paused, almost as an afterthought. Wear white? It photographs well. He nodded once to wretcheder gesture so devoid of warmth it barely qualified as human, and moved to the door. Mr. Thorne. Clara called. He looked back. Whatever you think you're punishing, she said, make sure you can live with what it turns you into. His mouth twitched, not a smile. I've been living with it for 15 years. The door clicked shut. The room exhaled. Richard reached for her, then stopped, shame bowing his shoulders. Don't, Clara said, not unkindly. Not today. She returned to the window. The first flakes had begun to fall, tiny white confetti drifting down on a city that would not notice. Somewhere down there, a clerk would stamp a license. Somewhere up here, a woman in a white dress would become a story other people told. Clara pressed her forehead to the glass until the cold sank straight through to bone. She could marry him to save what was left. She could sign away everything but the one thing he couldn't have. Her heart thudded once. Stubborn and alive. You're not a pawn, she told herself. You're a player. Learn the board. Learn the rules. Then break them. Behind her, the leather folio waited. Below her, the city burned. And somewhere across town, Daniel Thorne was already arranging the next move. Snow-dusted Fifth Avenue like spilled sugar, and the Gothic spires of St. Patrick's Cathedral stabbed upward against a pewter sky. Tourists paused at barricades, smartphones raised. As a motorcade of black SUVs slid to the curb. Inside the cathedral, white roses had been banked along the pews. Crystal chandeliers polished to an almost blinding shine. A pipe organ thundered through the vaulted ceiling, each note vibrating like the city's heartbeat. Everything was flawless. Everything was hollow. Clara stood in the anteroom, the satin weight of a Vera Wang gown cascading around her. The mirror reflected a woman so composed she could have been a mannequin, blue eyes rimmed with kohl. Lips painted rose, hair pinned in an intricate crown. She looked like the headline they wanted her to be. Her mother's pearls hung at her throat. They felt like a shackle. Richard Winters entered quietly, a pale shadow of the man he had once been. His hands shook as he offered his arm. "You don't have to look at me," he said. "I know what this is." Clara swallowed hard. "Then look at me, Dad. Watch me walk down that aisle. If you're going to sell me to your executioner, at least have the decency to witness it." He flinched but nodded. Together they stepped into the nave. The congregation rose. Socialites, bankers, hedge fund barons, journalists with discreet cameras. Their eyes followed Clara like she was currency changing hands. At the far end of the aisle, Daniel Thorne stood waiting. Black tuxedo, tailored razor-sharp, cufflinks catching the candlelight, jaw carved from stone. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He simply waited, like a verdict. Every step Clara took echoed like a gavel. Her chin lifted higher, her spine locked straight. If this was theatre, then she would be the actress who refused to break. When they reached the altar, Richard kissed her cheek, whispered "forgive me," and retreated. Daniel extended his hand. It was warm, steady, terrifying. The priest's voice filled the cathedral. "Do you, Clara Winters, take this man?" Clara's heart pounded. Her pulse roared in her ears. She thought of escape, running into the snow, ripping off the veil, disappearing into the chaos of the city. But she heard her father's breath hitch in the front pew, and she thought of the workers whose pensions hung on Winter's shipping surviving. "I do," she said. Clear, cold. The words rang out like shackles locking. "And do you?" "Daniel Thorne, take this woman." Daniel's gaze never left hers. His voice was a blade sliding free. "I do." No hesitation. No warmth. Just possession. The priest gestured. "You may seal your vows." Daniel bent and pressed his mouth to hers. It was quick, clinical, devoid of tenderness. More notarization than kiss. Camera shutters clicked. Gasps fluttered through the pews. Clara forced herself not to flinch. She met his eyes after, steady, daring him to see her defiance. The reception wasn't a reception. It was a quarterly earnings call disguised in crystal stemware. The Thorn Tower penthouse ballroom gleamed with floor-to-ceiling glass, Manhattan glittering like a million diamonds below. Waiters in white gloves circulated with Dom Perignon and caviar bleu. Conversations hummed about mergers, hedge ratios, political donations. Clara sat beside Daniel at the head table, her fingers wrapped around a champagne flute she hadn't touched. She felt less like a bride than like a headline. A tall woman in a silver-sheathed dress approached the kind of woman who looked at people the way brokers looked at stocks. Regina Voss, Thorn Industries, CFO. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thorn," Regina purred, lips painted in a perfect slash of crimson. "Not everyone gets to turn a bankruptcy into a fairy tale." Clara tilted her head, smile sweet as arsenic. "Fairy tales usually end with love, Regina. This is more of a cautionary tale." Regina's eyes flicked, sharp and amused. But before she could retort, Daniel's hand slid across Clara's chair, resting on the back like a brand. "That's enough," he told Regina, voice edged with steel. "Go balance something." Regina's smirk faltered before she melted back into the crowd. Clara exhaled, then turned on him. What was that? Possessiveness? Or just protecting your investment? Daniel leaned close, his breath grazing her ear. "Call it protecting the narrative." Clara faced forward, lifting her untouched flute in a mock toast. "Here's 2 narratives, then. May they suffocate us both." Daniel clinked his glass lightly against hers. "You'll find suffocation is survivable." They drank nothing. The city glittered beneath them, cold and endless. Around them, deals were whispered, fortunes rearranged, and their names were already trending on Twitter. It was official. The marriage was inked, photographed, consumed by the public. And for Clara Winters, the war had just begun. The limousine slid silently through the midnight streets, city lights streaking across tinted glass like veins of fire. Clara sat rigid in her seat, veil folded neatly in her lap, the weight of her gown pressing down like chains. Across from her, Daniel sat with one arm braced on the leather seat, collar open just enough to show the taut line of his throat. His gaze wasn't on her. It was on the skyline, as if he'd already moved on to his next conquest. Neither spoke. The silence stretched so tight it hummed. When the car finally swept beneath the awning of Thorn Tower, photographers flashed like gunfire. Clara stepped out first, blinded by strobe lights, her arm caught in Daniel's iron grip as he steered her inside. To the crowd outside, it was the image of power, wealth, control. To Clara, it was a sentence being carried out. The penthouse was cathedral-like in its own right, 40 floors above Tribeca, glass walls revealing the city glittering below, marble floors cold underfoot. A fire burned low in a sleek hearth, but the room felt colder than the streets they'd left. Daniel loosened his cufflinks, dropped them onto a tray, and shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket. He moved with efficient precision, as if even undressing was another line item on his schedule. Clara stood in the center of the room, heart hammering, hands clenched around her bouquet until the stems snapped. She had braced for this moment all night, for the consummation of a contract she had never wanted. When Daniel finally turned to her, her breath caught, but instead of closing the distance, he crossed to the bar, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, and downed it in one swallow. His eyes, when they returned to hers, were unreadable steel. "You can take the master suite," he said flatly. "I'll be in the study." Clara blinked. "That's it." Daniel set his glass down. Did you expect champagne and roses? I expected, she stopped, heat rising in her chest. I expected you'd at least follow through on your threat. Isn't this what you wanted? To own me down to my skin. His jaw flexed. You're not a prize to unwrap, Clara. You're leverage. I don't need your body for that. The words landed like a slap. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. So this is it. A wedding night without a wedding. A marriage without a marriage. Daniel's gaze flicked over her, colder than glass. Think of it as a merger. We share resources, not intimacy. Something in her twisted, a mix of relief and insult. Relief that he wouldn't touch her. Insult that he wouldn't even want to. Fine, she snapped. Then stay out of my way. If you think I'm going to parade around as your mannequin wife, think again. Daniel crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just shy of her. The air crackled, his presence overwhelming. You'll do exactly what's required, he said quietly. You'll smile when the cameras flash. You'll stand beside me at galas. And you'll keep winter's shipping alive by wearing my name. That is the extent of your role. Clara lifted her chin, forcing herself not to back away. And what's yours? To keep punishing my father until there's nothing left of him. His eyes darkened, a flicker of something dangerous sparking beneath. Until he remembers every morning what he cost me. They stared at each other, the space between them humming with unsaid truths, unspent rage. Finally, Daniel stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow, the world starts judging. He turned, picked up his jacket, and left without looking back. The door to the study clicked shut behind him. Clara sank onto the edge of the massive bed in the master suite, her gown spilling around her like white flames. She pressed her palms to her face, shaking. She had prepared herself for domination, humiliation, even cruelty. She hadn't prepared for indifference. The city roared below, horns blaring, sirens wailing, life pulsing on. And here she was, trapped in a penthouse cage, bound to a man who hated her name more than he could ever want her. Her chest ached with fury, with loneliness, with the stubborn fire that refused to die. Fine, she whispered into the silence. If this is war, then I'll fight it my way. She rose, stripped off the gown piece by piece, leaving it crumpled on the floor like shed armor. In the mirror, she caught her reflection, not a bride, not a pawn, but a woman who would not break. Clara slid beneath the covers, staring at the ceiling until dawn broke grey over the city, and in the study down the hall, Daniel Thorne sat sleepless at his desk, Scotch glass in hand, staring at an old photograph he never let anyone see. Neither of them knew it yet, but the battle lines of their marriage had already been drawn. The tabloids had wasted no time. Billionaire Daniel Thorne, Mary's heiress Clara Winters in Ceremony of the Year, Beauty and the Ice King, Love or Leverage. Inside the Thorne-Winters union, every newsstand on Madison Avenue screamed their faces. Clara's profile, elegant defiant, splashed beside Daniel's granite jawline. It wasn't romance. It was branding by the end of the week. Her schedule had been mapped out with the precision of a military campaign. Charity luncheons, black tie galas, dinners with senators and CEOs. Visibility, the PR team called it. Clara called it humiliation. The first event was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a fundraiser for the new wing. The marble steps gleamed under spotlights. Paparazzi corralled behind barricades. Clara stood in the back of the limousine, her navy silk gown clinging like armor, her pulse hammering as flashbulbs exploded outside. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, utterly Smile, he said without looking at her. Clara's jaw tightened. Smile for who? The donors who think I'm your accessory? Or the vultures waiting to write about how I blinked wrong? He finally turned, eyes cool steel. Smile, because perception is currency. Clara, and I don't keep liabilities. Her anger flared, but the chauffeur opened the door before she could answer. Daniel stepped out first, then extended his hand like a choreographed move. Cameras fired. Clara placed her hand in his spine straight, chin lifted, and together they ascended the steps. The crowd gasped. Photographers shouted. And Clara smiled, just not the way Daniel meant. Her smile was sharp, daring, the kind that said, I'm not your mannequin. I'm the fire you can't put out. Inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered over gowns worth more than houses. Tuxedos cut in old-world styles, conversations laced with money and politics. Clara kept her head high, but she felt their eyes calculating, assessing, whispering. A senator's wife leaned in, voice honeyed. You must be thrilled, dear. Daniel is quite the catch. Clara sipped her champagne, eyes cool. A catch implies a choice. This was more of a net. The woman blinked, unsettled. Daniel, beside her, didn't flinch, but his lips curved almost imperceptibly, as if her barb amused him. Later, as Clara tried to escape to a quieter gallery, she was intercepted by Vivian Blackwood, socialite and longtime Thorne ally, her crimson gown dripping confidence. Well, well, Vivian purred. The new Mrs. Thorne, you look lovely, almost convincing. Clara's eyes narrowed. Convincing of what? That you belong here. Vivian's smile was sugar over poison. But don't worry. Everyone knows this is a strategic arrangement. You'll do fine as long as you remember your place. Clara's grip tightened on her clutch. And where exactly is that? Vivian leaned closer, perfume heady. 2 steps behind him. Always, Clara didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, closing the distance until their noses nearly touched. Her voice was velvet over steel. Funny, Daniel doesn't seem like the type who wants anyone behind him. Certainly not me. Gasps rippled nearby. Vivian stiffened, then forced a brittle smile, and that was when Daniel appeared, sliding into the space with disarming calm. His hand found Clara's waist, anchoring her. To the crowd, it looked like intimacy. To Clara, it felt like a claim. Vivian, Daniel said, voice smooth as ice. Enjoy the art. Stop trying to become it. Vivian's jaw clenched. She retreated, heels clicking sharp against the marble. Clara exhaled, still rigid. You didn't need to rescue me. I didn't, Daniel murmured, his hand firm at her back. I needed to remind her whose war she was trying to fight. Clara turned her head, fury sparking. And what am I in this war? A weapon, a shield. His eyes met hers, unblinking. Both, they left the gala late, cameras still flashing, headlines already writing themselves. In the car, silence stretched taut between them. Clara stared out the window, city lights blurring. Finally, Daniel spoke, voice low. You don't bend. Not for them, not even for me. Clara turned, startled. Would you prefer I did? For a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Frustration, maybe fascination. Then it was gone. He leaned back, mask restored. Bending breaks faster than steel. She studied him. confused by the almost compliment buried in the cruelty. For the first time, Clara wondered if Daniel Thorne wasn't just trying to destroy her father. Maybe he was testing her, and she had no intention of failing. The winter charity ball at the Plaza Hotel had been a fixture of Manhattan's social calendar for decades. For Clara, it had always been a night of glamour-sequined gowns, champagne towers, waltzes under the gilded ceiling. This year, it felt like walking into an ambush. The ballroom was a blur of crystal chandeliers and hushed gossip. Whispers followed her as she moved through the crowd in a silver gown, Daniel's hand firm at the small of her back. She could feel eyes measuring her, mouths shaping rumors: the pawn bride, the forced union, the winter's heiress sold for survival. She had prepared herself for the stares. What she hadn't prepared for was the venom. Near the champagne fountain, a man in his 60s intercepted her path. Charles Remington, an old money investor with too much bourbon in his glass and too much bitterness in his blood. He had lost heavily in a Thorne takeover years ago, and the wound had never healed. Well, Remington drawled, his words slurring slightly. The famous Mrs. Thorne. Tell me, darling, what's it like being the ribbon on your father's bailout package? Laughter bubbled around him from hangers-on, eager to please. Clara froze, cheeks flaming, nails biting into her clutch. She opened her mouth, voice steady despite the sting. At least my father raised me to face a room without hiding behind whiskey. Gasps rippled, but Remington only smirked, leaning closer, his breath sour. Careful, sweetheart. A pretty face won't keep you safe when your husband gets bored. And men like Daniel always get bored. The words hit like a knife. For one panicked heartbeat, Clara felt utterly exposed, stripped bare in front of Manhattan's most ruthless audience. And then Daniel was there. He moved like a storm rolling in, his hand sliding around Clara's waist, pulling her flush against his side. His voice cut through the laughter, low and lethal. Funny, Daniel said, grey eyes locking on Remington's. You're lecturing me about boredom. Yet here you are, drunk, desperate, clinging to relevance at a party you weren't even supposed to be invited to. The room stilled. Remington's smirk faltered. Daniel leaned closer, his words a scalpel. If you ever speak to my wife like that again, I'll remind you what happens to men who cross me. And I promise you, Charles, I'll enjoy it more the second time. Remington's face blanched, his glass trembling. He muttered something inaudible and stumbled back into the crowd. Whispers erupted. Cameras discreetly lifted. The story was already being written. Clara's heart raced, pressed against Daniel's side. His arm was still around her, firm, possessive, shielding. She hated how safe it felt. You didn't have to, she began. Yes, I did, he interrupted, eyes still scanning the room like a predator. No one humiliates you, not in public. Not while you wear my name. His words were cold, but his grip was not. Clara searched his face, confused by the contradiction, the ruthless CEO protecting her honor as if it were his own. So on property, then, guarded like an asset on a balance sheet. Daniel's gaze flicked down to her, unreadable. Call it whatever you like, but you're mine to defend. She pulled away slightly, needing space, needing air. You're impossible. And yet, he murmured, lips curving faintly. You're still here, the rest of the evening, blurred dancing, speeches, endless conversations with donors. But Clara felt every eye on her, not with pity now, but with calculation. Daniel had made a statement. Whatever this marriage was whatever their private wars. In public, he had claimed her. Back in the limousine, silence stretched between them again. The city rolled by in streaks of neon and snow. Clara finally spoke, her voice quieter than she intended. You made it sound like you were protecting your brand. But tonight, it didn't feel like just that. Daniel turned his head, studying her. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of tires on asphalt. Then he said, softly but firmly, don't confuse survival with sentiment. Clara, she looked out the window, heart aching with a confusion she refused to name, and Daniel, staring at the reflection of her profile in the glass, realized with a start that, for the first time in years, he hadn't been protecting his brand at all. He had been protecting her. The days after the Plaza Ball moved like fog morning meetings, press interviews, dinners where Clara smiled until her jaw ached. Outwardly, she was the perfect Mrs. Thorne. Inwardly, her chest was a battlefield, humiliation, confusion, and that dangerous flicker of warmth she felt every time Daniel's hand brushed hers in public. She told herself it was nothing. Survival instinct? Muscle memory? A lie she needed to believe. But the lie cracked on a Tuesday night. Daniel was still at the office, and Clara wandered Thorne Tower, restless, the silence pressing on her like a weight. She drifted into his study dark mahogany shelves, neat files stacked with military precision. The faint scent of scotch soaked into the leather armchairs. She shouldn't snoop. She knew it, but something compelled her. On his desk, half buried under reports, she found a worn folder. The tab read Pier 47 Incident Report. Her breath stalled. Fingers trembling, she opened it. Newspaper clippings, OSHA reports, faded photographs. Headlines screamed. Crane collapse kills young woman. Negligence suspected at Winter's Shipping. At the center was a photograph of a girl 16, laughing, hair whipped by the wind at a Brooklyn pier. The resemblance to Daniel was unmistakable. Same storm grey eyes. Same sharp jaw softened by youth. The caption, Lily Thorne. Clara's knees nearly gave out. Her father's company, her father's negligence, and Daniel's sister dead because of it. Suddenly, the pieces slammed together. The cold contract, the merciless marriage, the vow to make her father suffer. She wasn't a wife. She was a living reminder of a graveyard. Her hand covered her mouth, tears stinging. The door opened. Daniel stepped in, loosening his tie, pausing when he saw her at the desk. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw him hesitate. You weren't supposed to see that, he said quietly. Clara spun on him, voice breaking. That girl, Lily, she was your sister. His jaw clenched. He crossed the room slowly, like a man approaching a minefield. She was 16. Brilliant, stubborn. She wanted to be an engineer. That night, she was shadowing a foreman at Pier 47. When the crane fell, she was right beneath it. Clara's voice cracked. And Winter's Shipping my father settled. Daniel spat, fury flashing. Settled with lawyers and accountants while I buried her. Do you know what it's like, Clara? To stand over a coffin while the man responsible writes a check and calls it closure. Her chest heaved. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. Daniel's eyes blazed. That's why you're here. Not for your face. Not for your name. You're here so that every day your father wakes up, he sees you wearing mine. Every day he remembers what his carelessness cost me. Clara staggered back, as if the truth itself had struck her. Tears spilled, but her spine remained straight. So I'm not even your revenge. I'm just the knife you twist in him. Daniel's voice softened, though the anger still burned beneath. I told you the first night Title need your heart. I need his suffering. Clara's lips trembled, pain lacing every word. And what about me, Daniel? What about the suffering you inflict on me? For the first time, he faltered. His eyes, usually iron-shuttered, something raw flickering there. Guilt, but he turned away, pouring a drink with hands to steady. You're strong enough to bear it. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. You think this is justice, but it's just another tragedy. For both of us. She brushed past him, gown whispering against the floor, and disappeared into the hallway. Daniel stayed behind, glass untouched, staring at his sister's photo until the city blurred in his eyes. Clara curled up in the dark of her bedroom, grief crushing her. Her father's sins had chained her to this marriage, but Daniel's grief had weaponized it. For the first time, she saw him not just as a ruthless CEO, but as a brother hollowed out by loss, consumed by vengeance, and for the first time, she wondered if there was any way forward when love and hate were woven from the same thread. The phone call came just after dawn. Clara was half asleep, the city's grey light seeping through the penthouse windows when her cell buzzed against the nightstand. One look at the screen and her heart plummeted. Mum? Her voice shook as she answered. Her mother's sobs cracked through the line. It's your father. He collapsed. They're rushing him to Mount Sinai. Clara Heen might not. The words blurred. Clara was already out of bed, silk robe fluttering as she fumbled for clothes. When Daniel found her minutes later in the foyer, she was shoving her feet into heels, eyes wild. What happened? He asked sharply. My father, she gasped. He's in the hospital. I have to go. You're not going alone. Daniel grabbed his coat, signaling to security before she could argue. The press will smell blood the second they see you there. Clara spun on him, fury slicing through panic. This isn't about headlines, Daniel. This is my father. I don't care if 1,000 cameras see me break. I need to be with him. Daniel's gaze flickered, something unreadable in the steel, but he didn't argue. Then let's go. Mount Sinai smelled of antiseptic and dread. The ER hummed with controlled chaos nurses, barking vitals, gurneys rattling, monitors beeping like frantic heartbeats. Clara burst into the ICU waiting area, her mother rising from a plastic chair, face grey with fear. He's stable, but barely, she whispered. Massive heart attack. They're not sure he'll survive the next 48 hours. Clara's knees buckled, but Daniel's hand shot out, steadying her elbow. She wanted to shake him off, but her body betrayed her hit, leaned into his strength when she felt her own vanish. She pressed her palms to her face, tears spilling hot and unrelenting. I can't lose him. Not like this. Hours blurred. Doctors came and went, muttering about angioplasty, about damage to severe, about quality of life. Clara sat at her father's bedside, gripping his cold hand, whispering fragments of childhood memories, Christmas mornings, summer barbecue, the nights he'd read her stories until she fell asleep. Stay with me, Dad, she begged through tears. Please, I'll do anything. Behind her, Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone, but his fists clenched at his sides, and his eyes, those storm-grey eyes, betrayed something else. Conflict that night. Clara found him in the hospital's empty corridor, staring out at the city through a rain-streaked window. "You could help him," she said, voice hoarse. "You have the resources, the influence. You could save Winter's shipping, give him peace. Why won't you?" Daniel didn't look at her. "Because peace is what he doesn't deserve." Her chest cracked. "So you'll just watch him die. Watch me break." His jaw tightened. "Don't ask me to forgive what buried my sister, Clara. Don't ask me to forget the dirt on that grave." Her tears burned. "I'm not asking you to forgive. I'm asking you to choose between hate and me." Finally, he turned. For once, the mask was gone. She saw exhaustion, torment, the raw edges of a man at war with himself. His voice dropped to a rasp. "You think I don't see you? Every time you fight me, every time you hold your head high in a room that wants to tear you down, I see you." And he cut himself off, dragging in a breath. "But I can't give him absolution. Not after Lily." Clara stepped closer, tears streaking her cheeks. "Then don't forgive him. Forgive yourself. Forgive the boy who lost his sister and never healed. You're still bleeding, Daniel, and you're using me to keep the wound open." The words hit him like shrapnel. He flinched, eyes closing briefly. In the ICU machines beeped steadily, indifferent to the war raging in the hallway. Clara stood there, chest heaving. Daniel's storm-grey eyes locked on hers. For the first time, the air between them wasn't just fire. It was fracture. It was choice. Daniel reached for her hand. For once, not as a claim, not as control, but as a man grasping for something beyond the wreckage. And Clara let him hold it. Snow fell in heavy sheets over Manhattan, muffling the city's usual roar. From the penthouse windows, the skyline looked like a snow globe, perfect, distant, untouchable. Inside, Clara Winters lay curled on the velvet sofa, her body shivering under a thin throw blanket, her face pale. She had been running herself ragged days at the hospital with her father, nights fulfilling appearances beside Daniel, endless hours of fighting tears she refused to shed in public. Her body had finally revolted. Fever burned through her, leaving her fragile in a way she despised. Daniel found her like that, half-conscious, a cup of untouched tea on the table, her hair damped with sweat. For a moment, he just stood in the doorway, the sight striking something raw inside him. Clara, always so fierce, always standing tall even when surrounded by vultures, looked breakable. And the realization unsettled him more than any hostile boardroom or rival deal ever had. "Clara," his voice was lower than usual, stripped of steel. He crouched beside her, brushing his knuckles lightly against her cheek. The heat of her skin made his stomach clench. Her eyes fluttered open. "Don't touch me," she whispered, though the protest had no weight. "You're burning up," he said. "You should have told me." She tried to sit up, but he pressed her gently back against the cushions. "Stop fighting. For once, let someone else take control." Her lips curved in a faint, bitter smile. "That's all you've ever done, take control. Not like this," he murmured. He called the doctor himself, snapping orders with the precision of a general. Within an hour, a private physician was checking her vitals, prescribing fluids and rest. Daniel hovered, refusing to leave the room, every instruction branded into his memory. When the doctor finally departed, Clara drifted in and out of sleep, and Daniel stayed. He brought cool cloths for her forehead, coaxed her to sip water, sat through the long hours of fever that stretched into night at one point. She stirred, catching him slouched in a chair beside her. His tie-on shirt sleeves rolled, exhaustion darkening his eyes. "Why?" she croaked. He straightened, startled. "Why? What? Why? Are you here?" He hesitated. The answer wasn't simple. "Not anymore, because," he said at last, voice quiet, "I couldn't stand the thought of you breaking. Not like this." Her lashes lowered, tears welling despite her will. "You hate me. You hate my family. I hate what your father did," he corrected softly. "But you're not him." The words cracked something inside her, something she'd been gripping too tightly. Her throat ached with unshed sobs, her chest heavy with confusion. "Don't say things like that," she whispered. "Don't give me hope." He leaned closer, his hand brushing a strand of damp hair from her forehead. "Maybe hope is the only thing keeping either of us alive." For a long moment, their eyes locked storm grey against sapphire blue. The world outside disappeared. The city, the vendettas, the contracts, none of it mattered. It was just him and her and the heat of a fever that felt dangerously like longing. By morning, her fever had broken. She woke to find a blanket tucked around her, a tray of breakfast waiting, and Daniel asleep in the chair, head tipped back, jaw slack in the pale light. For the first time, Clara saw him unguarded, not the ruthless CEO, not the avenger, but a man worn thin by loss and haunted by something deeper. Her chest tightened. She should have hated him. She should have kept the walls high. But as she watched him sleep, her heart betrayed her, whispering the one truth she feared most. She was falling for him. The gala at the Four Seasons Hotel was meant to be routine. Another evening of tuxedos, champagne, and whispered alliances. Clara had learned to endure them, smile for the cameras, glide through conversations, pretend her heart wasn't unraveling. But this night, something was off. From the moment they arrived, Daniel's security detail hovered closer than usual, earpieces buzzing, eyes scanning corners. Clara noticed the stiffness in Daniel's posture, the way his hand lingered at her back, not just in possession, but in vigilance. Something wrong, she murmured as they stepped into the chandeliered ballroom. "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied. But his jaw was too tight, his gaze too sharp, an hour into the gala. While Clara chatted with a philanthropist about her new hospital initiative, a figure brushed too close. She felt the jab before she saw the face a masked man disguised as a waiter, slipping something cold and metallic against her ribs. "Don't scream," the voice hissed. "Walk with me." Quietly, her blood ran cold. She tried to glance toward Daniel, but the man's grip tightened. The room spun as he steered her toward a side exit. Guests laughed, oblivious, as she vanished behind the curtains. Daniel noticed instantly, the space beside him empty. His chest clenched, instincts roaring. "Where is she?" His voice cut like a blade into his security team's. "Comes." "South corridor," came the reply. "She's being moved." Daniel didn't wait. He moved like a storm, shoving through service doors, marble floors echoing his rage. In the loading bay, Clara struggled against the man's grip. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice shaking but fierce. "Your leverage," he sneered. "The Thorn Empire makes enemies. And you, sweetheart, are the perfect bargaining chip." Clara's heart pounded. Again a pawn, she thought bitterly. Always someone's weapon. Then the door burst open. Daniel, storm grey eyes locked on hers, fury radiating off him in waves. "Let her go," he ordered, voice lethal calm. The man pressed the knife tighter to Clara's side. "One more step and she bleeds." Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands raising slightly in a mock surrender. But his gaze never wavered. "You don't understand what you've just done. You didn't grab my wife. You grabbed the only thing in this world I won't lose." Clara's breath caught. The man hesitated just enough. Daniel struck. In one swift motion, he disarmed him, sending the knife skittering across the floor. Security stormed in, dragging the attacker away, and then Clara was in Daniel's arms, trembling, her cheek pressed to his chest. His heart thundered like a war drum. "You're safe," he rasped into her hair, clutching her as if to fuse her to him. "I swear to you, Clara, no one will ever touch you again. Not while I'm alive." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why, Daniel? Why risk everything for me? I thought I was just your revenge." He pulled back enough to look at her, raw emotion blazing through the cracks in his armor. "You were never just revenge," he confessed, voice breaking. "Not anymore. You're the only thing that makes the hate bearable." And tonight, when I thought I might lose you, he swallowed hard, struggling for words he'd never spoken. "You're not my pawn, Clara. You're my reason." Her chest ached, torn between disbelief and the rush of hope. "You'll have to prove it," she whispered, his lips curved in the faintest, pained smile. "I intend to." Starting now, he kissed her, then not cold, not calculated, but desperate and real. The world around them dissolved, the security, the chaos, the city itself. It was just fire meeting fire, two hearts colliding where love had no business surviving. That night, back at the penthouse, Clara lay awake, Daniel's words echoing through her mind. He had saved her not because of optics, not because of leverage, but because losing her would have broken him. For the first time, she let herself wonder, could love grow from ashes this dark? The attack at the Four Seasons left ripples across Manhattan. The headlines were merciless. Mrs. Thorne targeted in gala attack. Is Daniel Thorne's empire under siege? Marriage of power, marriage of danger. For Clara, the noise outside didn't matter. What mattered was the way Daniel had held her that night, the raw truth in his eyes when he said she was his reason. It haunted her in the quiet moments, in the way his touch lingered longer, gentler, as if afraid she might disappear. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? 2 weeks later, her father's health crashed again. Mount Sinai's halls felt like purgatory. Clara sat by Henry Winter's bedside, clutching his frail hand, her heart heavy with dread. Machines beeped steadily, but the doctors warned his heart was too weak to keep fighting. "Clara," her father rasped, his eyes glassy but intent, "I was wrong. I sold you to save my pride. I never deserved your sacrifice. Don't," she whispered, tears burning. "Don't you dare apologize now. Stay alive. That's all I want." Behind her, Daniel stood in the shadows, listening. His chest tightened at every word. He had wanted this man broken, haunted by guilt. And now, seeing him frail and ashamed, Daniel realized the revenge he had clung to for 15 years had already been accomplished. There was nothing left to win, only everything left to lose. That night, back at the penthouse, Daniel found Clara standing by the glass wall, the city glittering below. Her arms were wrapped around herself, her reflection fragile against the skyline. "Clara," his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard. She turned, her eyes shimmering with grief and defiance. If you still want to punish him, go ahead. But know this: when you hurt him, you hurt me too. And I can't. I can't keep surviving both. Daniel crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. His hands hovered at her arms but didn't touch. Not until she let him. I don't want to hurt you anymore, he said, voice raw. I've been chasing a ghost. Revenge gave me nothing. But you... He swallowed, storm grey eyes burning. You gave me something I thought I'd buried with Lily. You gave me hope. Clara's breath caught. I'm done, Clara. Done with the hate. Done with the war. If you'll let me, I want to start over. With you, not as a merger. Not as a weapon. But as a man who loves his wife. The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Clara's tears spilled. She shook her head, not in refusal, but in disbelief. You don't get to just say that and erase everything you've done. I know, he said. I can't erase it. I can only spend the rest of my life proving it. He finally touched her hands warm on her arms, steady, patient. Clara Winters. Clara Thorne. You were never my pawn. You are my partner, my equal. My heart, her walls crumbled. She pressed her forehead to his chest, sobbing quietly. You stupid, stubborn man. Why did it take almost losing everything to finally see me? His arms wrapped around her, holding her like the only thing that mattered. Because I was blind, but not anymore. Weeks later, as spring thawed the city, Clara walked beside Daniel into Central Park. The gossip columns still speculated. The business pages still analyzed their every move. But in the quiet of the park, hand in hand, it didn't matter. Her father's health stabilized. Winter's Shipping began restructuring this time with Daniel's discreet support. Not because of revenge, because of her, as they sat on a bench beneath blooming cherry trees. Clara looked at him, really looked, and saw not the ruthless CEO or the boy broken by loss. She saw the man who had chosen her, finally, above his hate, and for the first time she let herself believe. Maybe, she whispered, her fingers intertwining with his, we can make this marriage ours. Not forced, not broken, ours. Daniel kissed her hand, his smile rare but real. A new beginning. The city roared on around them, sirens' laughter, the hum of life. But on that bench, beneath petals drifting like confetti, Daniel and Clara found something stronger than vengeance. They found love. 2 years later, Central Park in early summer shimmered under golden light. Children laughed near the carousel, runners passed with earbuds, and the smell of roasted peanuts drifted on the breeze. On a quiet patch of lawn, Clara Thorne spread out a picnic blanket. Her sundress fluttered in the breeze, her sapphire eyes bright with a happiness she never thought possible. Beside her, a stroller rocked gently as she adjusted the blanket around a sleeping baby girl. Lily Grace Thorne. The name had been Clara's idea. At first Daniel resisted, the name too sharp a wound. But when he held their daughter for the first time, tiny fingers curling round his, the grief cracked. Naming her after his sister no longer reopened the past, it honored it. Careful with the strawberries, Clara teased. Glancing up, Daniel was beside the basket, sleeves rolled up, looking infuriatingly relaxed for a man whose empire still dominated Wall Street. His storm-grey eyes softened when they fell on Clara and the baby, a sight no boardroom could rival. I built a multi-billion-dollar company, he deadpanned, holding up the fruit. I think I can manage fruit distribution. Clara laughed, the sound rich and easy. It was the laugh of a woman no longer carrying the weight of contracts and revenge. Henry Winters sat on a nearby bench, Kane resting at his side, his once failing health steadied by treatment. He watched his daughter's family with eyes glistening, guilt and gratitude blending into something like peace. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel settled on the blanket, slipping an arm around Clara's waist. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. 2 years, she murmured. Feels like a lifetime ago. The wedding, the hate, the fights. Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. We were both broken people trying to use each other as weapons. I'm glad we lost that war. Clara smiled faintly, watching Lily's tiny chest rise and fall. We didn't lose. We found something better. His hand tightened at her waist. Our beginning, the baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. Daniel picked her up awkward, careful, protective. For a man who once terrified the city, he now looked undone by a 6-pound bundle of innocence. Clara's heart swelled at the sight. This was the man she had married out of duty. The man she had despised, feared, fought. And this was the man she now loved, the one who had fought his way back from hate. For her, for them. The city roared on in the distance, skyscrapers glittering, life rushing forward. But in their small circle on the grass, time slowed. A forced marriage had become a sanctuary. A prison had become a home. Vengeance had become love. Clara reached for Daniel's hand, their fingers entwining over their daughter's small form. And for the first time, she truly believed in forever.